Oh, great. Somebody can see me. Hi. Hi, I'm Angela of Angela's Kitchen. And today we're going to be making cinnamon rolls, or you might call them cinnamon buns. I'll be running the presentation first, and then I'll answer any questions you might have at the end of the session. If you have any questions that you don't want to put into the chat, or you run out of time, you can always email me to the address on the screen below this video. It's called, or just send it to Angela at angelaskitchen.com, where you can drop me a line. To find the recipes for what I'll be sharing, you want to click on the PDF link on your screen below this presentation so you can have all the recipes for later. And there's a whole bunch of different filling and flavor options for this recipe. So the rolls that we'll be making today are made with a gluten and dairy-free enriched yeast bread that has a wonderfully soft and tender crumb. And we're going to fill that with a filling made with brown sugar and cinnamon. And the recipe as shared does have a basic powdered sugar glaze to put on top. But if you would also like, we have an optional dairy-free cream cheese frosting recipe in the packet if you'd rather use that. The dough itself is super versatile, and I use it with so many different kinds of fillings, and I shape it in different ways depending on the holiday or my family's mood. They are hungry people, so I like to mix it up for them. And I'm going to offer some of those suggestions today and show you how I shape it in different ways, but feel free to fill it with your family's favorites and make it your own. The first thing I do want to talk about is the gluten-free flours. I get a lot of questions on some of the flours I use and why I generally don't list it as a blend. The reason I do that is so that people with other allergies, say to corn or legumes or potato, they can switch out the portion of the flour blend to a product that's more safe for them. So back when I started developing gluten-free recipes, 20 years ago, there just simply weren't any blends. And so I had to make my own. And I know there's a lot of blends now, and there's a lot of really great ones. So I'm going through the process now of testing different recipes. And with this recipe, I did test it with 2 different blends. I tried Bob's 1-to-1, and I found with this blend, you do want to add 1 or 2 more tablespoons of the flour blend to the recipe so that you get a good texture. Otherwise, it's a little too wet, a little too soft. With the other one I use, which is the Namaste brand, that's this one. This one, I was able to use exact same amount replacement of the flours and starches to the amount of the blend. And I didn't have any trouble at all as far as the texture. And in fact, in the video that I'm going to be showing making it, this is the blend that I'm using. For that, the one thing I do have to say about any flour blend that you're going to use, you want to not use any xanthan gum or guar gum or any kind of other stabilizers in that are listed in the recipe if your flour blend already has one, because this one already had it in it. So we're going to talk about measuring flour, and the reason I'm doing that right away is that I find baking is very chemistry based, and as opposed to just like whipping up dinner. So if you're cooking things in a skillet, you can toss in a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and get the flavors you want, and it'll turn out great. But with baking, it can be really fussy, especially with gluten-free baking. And baking really relies on very proper measurements and amounts. And when I publish a recipe on my blog or in my recipe books, I try to only publish things that worked really well in my home, that have been tested in my own kitchen. But sometimes something that worked for me really well doesn't necessarily work for someone else. And oftentimes I find it comes down to measurements. So I like to weigh all of my ingredients, and I used to list those a lot in all my recipes, but here in America, we just don't weigh our flours. And so there was a lot of confusion, especially because a lot of people, maybe they've just been diagnosed, they've not cooked a lot or baked a lot because they didn't need to. And weighing is, they'd rather use cups. So I list cups in my recipes now. And if you do want the weights, please email me at angela@angelaskitchen.com and I'll send those out to you. Um, so if someone says a recipe doesn't work out, usually a baking recipe, any of my friends or anything, I'll tell them, the first thing I wonder is how did they measure the flour? And most of the time, I find the method most used is you take a measuring cup and you're dipping it into the container. Maybe you're shaking it down or patting the top down to get it flat. And when you do that, it really packs the flour. And that method is very inaccurate. It can give you a cup of flour that weighs like 6 ounces or more in weight. And if you do the method I'm going to show you, it'll give you about a 4¼ ounce in weight, which is about what you want if in the recipe. If and 6 ounces or more to 4¼ ounces is a huge difference, right? Especially when it comes to baking, because just that couple of ounces extra of flour can really change the texture in a baked good. In a recipe that's about 3 cups, it can add up to 3/4 of a cup extra flour in your recipe, which will make your recipe really sad. It'll be dry, the texture will be off, super crumbly, and you just don't want that. Nobody should have a dry, sad cinnamon roll because cinnamon rolls should not be dry and sad. So you don't want to do that. So what I recommend doing is taking your container of your flour, of like rice flour or just a flour blend, and just stir it around. You want to stir it around. Take your measuring cup, spoon into it, and then take a really flat surface. I usually use the side of a butter knife, so it's really flat, and you just cut it off. You don't tap it down. Because otherwise that'll pack it again. So you just want to just scoop it off like that. And then that'll work really well for any kind of flours, gluten-free flours, or a flour blend. If you're measuring a starch, like a cornstarch or a potato starch, you'll want to use a whisk because starch is really packed down just on their own from gravity. So take that whisk. You don't want to whip a lot of air into it. You just want to run it back and forth through the container a couple times. And then again, scoop it in and then level it off at the top of your measuring cup. And that'll give you a really pretty accurate weight of what you want to use in your recipe. And that way, not everyone likes to measure or weigh. So that'll give you that. So I am going to talk now about, I think we should get going and I can show you how I make the recipe, sorry. I actually should talk to you about the method I use. I use a sponge and dough recipe method when I make my breads, and especially when it's an enriched bread. And so it's a 2-step process of bread making. So in the first step, it's what's called a sponge is made. And that's made from part of your gluten-free flours and part or all of the liquid in the recipe. And then you let that ferment for a period of time. And then the second step is adding the sponge and all the rest of the dough's ingredients together. And that method, it's reminiscent of sourdough methods. However, the sponge is like made from all fresh ingredients and not from an original starter. And I do this for 3 reasons. I do it for the taste. You get a much richer, more complex flavor, which is great. The texture, it's fluffier, it's softer, it's going to have more pull and chew like you're looking for. And also just for chemistry's sake, some of the different types of gluten-free flours might not, especially like legumes and beans and that kind of thing, if you put that in the first step, in the sponge step, it will really mellow the flavors and break down some of the flavor profiles that not everybody enjoys necessarily, but it can still let you use flours that have higher protein and will help really get the flour to have a stronger structure when you're making your product. So that's why I like to use it. So I'm going to show you So I mixed together one 3 hours, well, about 4 hours ago now, and then one right before this presentation. So you'll see the sponge in the recipe, and it has the flours and the room temperature milk and everything. So and this is just mixed up. This is what it looks like. However, this is after it's risen for a while. Can you see all the bubbles? So this is giving it some time. I really like to do this because it will give you a better texture, and it gives the yeast some time to really work and get active and started so that you can have a really good product afterwards. Um, so that's what I do with my breads. And if you want to translate that to another recipe of yours, with bread recipes, I would use the entire amount of liquid to about the same amount of flour, gluten-free flour is in the recipe, and use that as your sponge with the yeast, a little bit of your sweetener, and about a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, and it'll make you it, and then just leave it for 2 to 4 hours and just let it kind of bubble away and do its business, and it'll really add something to your breads. They'll rise better, the color's better when they bake. I think it's a really good method that you'll enjoy using. So I'm going to start a video that's going to show us how I shape these buns. I'm going to get that on here. Let me know if you can see it. There we go. Can you see my video? Hopefully you can. I'm going to get it started. Here we go. So we're going to make the filling first. I've got a dairy-free butter replacement. I have the brown sugar that was packed. And then I have some ground cinnamon. And you can see that the butter replacement is very soft. You want it to be able to really mix well with all of the ingredients so that it blends really smoothly. You want also, because the gluten-free dough, bread dough is very soft and sticky. So you don't want it to tear when you're trying to fill it. So that's why I start with such a soft butter replacement right at the beginning. Now I'm using Earth Balance here. It's one of my favorite ones to use because it doesn't have a lot of extra water added to it. And then not a lot of air whipped into it. So I'm using the Earth Balance sticks. If you can do dairy, feel free to use butter at this step. It's just we can't at our house. Or find one that you really like. We're getting that all mixed together nice and smooth. Oh, someone is asking me about recommendations for altitude baking. I can put that into a PDF along with some other questions in the next week or so on the same video page for you. I do live in Minnesota, but I have altered some of that for other people, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. So this is my sponge. This is my first time doing a video from on top. I usually, do classes live, so it's going to be a little off. We're going to add everything to my mixer here. I've got the sponge that I let sit for 4 hours, and we're going to add that in. I like to get every single scrap out of there. And when I let my sponge sit, I do cover it with a little bit of plastic wrap, just so, nothing floats in there while it's sitting and doing its business. Okay, I've got room temperature eggs that I'm going to add. I've got a little bit more of that Earth Balance, the butter replacement. That butter replacement, you could use coconut oil. But make sure that it is very soft, not liquid. And then also, instead of using 3 tablespoons, use 2 tablespoons. I find that with baking with coconut oil, you do want to reduce it by about 1/3 or to 1/4 for the amount of other things called for in a recipe, so that your baked good isn't oily. So there's my flour blend. I'm right there. And usually I would whisk in the xanthan gum at the same time into the flour blend. But my blend already has it today. So there's my mix. I'm going to put it in my onto my stand mixer. I do like to use a pretty heavy duty stand mixer because gluten-free doughs, especially breads and that kind of thing, are they're pretty stiff and wet. And I make a lot of double batches of things or triple batches. So with this recipe, you can double the recipe. I don't usually do more than one or two batches at a time, just so that I have enough time to shape the dough before it starts to raise. If I make more dough than that, it starts to puff up before I get a chance to shape it. And then that's a problem for me there. So now we're going to mix it. I do start it on a lower speed so that you don't have a flour puff up at your face. And then we're going to let that mix and spin for on a higher speed. We're going to do that for about 3.5 minutes. And that'll really get the xanthan gum a chance to activate, be stretchy. I cut ahead because nobody wants to watch that for 3.5 minutes, kind of boring. But you can start to see in the bowl how it's starting to stretch. You're starting to get a nice stretch there. Where it's pulling kind of into strands. You can see that. It's not a thin batter like a cake batter, and it's not as thick as a traditional gluten-filled bread recipe. It's going to be softer than that, really heavy, very sticky. So I'm going to turn it off here. We're going to get it off. You're going to have a little look at it. So I think this is the most important thing, just making sure your texture is really good. You do need a lot more moisture in a bread dough that's gluten-free than you do in a gluten-filled one. So you can see how it's you can kind of pull it back a little bit. It's got a little bit of texture. It's not so soft that it doesn't hold. It really holds the little peaks when you pull it off. See that? But it's still thick enough where you can shape it. So, and we'll show that. So I just really wanted you to see that because I think that's the biggest variable that's hard to tell in a recipe with the gluten-free baking. So we're going to get that mixer out of the way here, and then I'm going to get things shaping for you. So what I do is I use plastic wrap to help me shape this. If you don't want to use plastic, I have had some people use like a clean Silpat. But all my Silpats are really well used and crazy. So I do have a replacement for eggs. It is in the recipe farther down. You can use, I actually like to use golden flax as a replacement, ground golden flax. So my video stopped. Let's start that up again. Sorry about that. There we go. So I use that in my recipe with the hot water. So 2 tablespoons of, what is my recipe say? I am sorry. Let me look. There's a note. Okay, so I do use 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed. You can use golden or dark. I usually use golden just for the color. And then 6 tablespoons of hot water. And then you mix that up right at the beginning. I stir that together and then I let that kind of sit and get ready and gel. And then once that is nicely gelled, when it's time to add the eggs, I would put the flax replacement in there at that time. That's only there for binding. You don't need any kind of raising replacement because the yeast will take care of that. And speaking about that, you also, if you do decide to make a double recipe, you do not need to double the yeast. You won't need to do that because the yeast will take over and fill the entire dough. So you just use the one amount. So you don't need to, waste your yeast. You might as well save that for another recipe that you're going to make. So I've got this plastic wrap, and I don't know if you've noticed, but I did two sheets of it, and then I overlapped them slightly. I also kind of took my fingers and sealed along that edge together. It's just a little sticky, as you can see. And I'm going to use that plastic wrap to really help me shape the dough. It is so heavy, and I do want a nice, smooth, thin layer of dough. So that just really helps me manipulate it with how wet it is. And then I don't waste any dough. It's not going to stick on the table and that kind of thing. So the dough, because it is so sticky, you'll want to add either a little bit of oil to your hands. You can also use a spray, an oil spray if you'd like, and just spritz that over the dough, spray it on your hands a little bit. Make sure it's one that does not have gluten. But I'm just going to use some olive oil that I happen to have. If you use olive oil or any other kind of oil, what I would do is make sure it's one that has that is light tasting. You don't want one that's going to be heavy tasting. So I'm just going to get that all over my hands so I can touch the dough without it sticking to me. Trust me, I know it's a mess, but you're going to have really soft hands afterwards. It'll be great. It'll be so cosmetic, and you'll have a roll. So I'm just going to pat the dough out. I'm not going to really push it so hard that it sticks to my hands. I'm just patting it and manipulating it around. So we're just going to watch that. It's kind of exciting. I do use the edge of my hand to help do that. If you really, really, really don't want to touch the dough, if you have like texture issues and don't want to touch it, I understand. You can take another piece of plastic wrap and put it over the top and then pat that way. You might need to manipulate, take the plastic wrap off the top a couple times and reposition it. I apologize if you hear my dog in the background. He's very excited. But if you, or you could take a rolling pin and put it on top, layer plastic wrap over the top, and then use a rolling pin to help you move the dough around. You are going to have to reposition that plastic wrap on the top if you don't want to touch the dough. So I like to kind of get it a little bit square. Sometimes I kind of need to manipulate the plastic a little bit underneath to get it nice and flat. Yeah, just keep using the oil if you need it. I just add it if it feels like it's not quite sticking. This is very exciting to watch, I know. So somebody asked me what the serving size of a regular dough is. I make anywhere between 8 and 12 rolls from this recipe. So, and it kind of depends on how thick of a roll I make. A lot of times I'll make this just a little bit longer and I'll cut it into 12 rolls and they'll be thinner and I'll put them in a 9x13 pan. And just because sometimes I think with my kids and everything, it's more about the number they get than how thick it is. Like one big thick one is not the same as two thin ones. So I'll cut them thinner so they feel like they got more. But a lot of times I cut them in 8 pieces. 9 or 12 is usually the size amounts I do. So I'm getting ready to put my filling in, and that's what we made earlier. It's nice and soft. We're going to just dollop it on the dough. It's going to be soft enough that we can do that. I'm going to wipe my hands off, though I'm a little slimy here. All right. I thought I cut some of that out, but I didn't. Sorry. That's my towel. All right, here is my cinnamon filling here. This is where in the packet you'll find a lot of other flavor combinations. I've got a cardamom one. I've got cranberry filling. You can do a sticky roll where you put kind of a brown sugar goo love on the bottom of your pan first and then put your rolls in. You can make a maple version. There's just all kinds of different ones. You can use this dough to make monkey bread as well by just scooping it out of the pan. So I'm using my spoon here. I'm going to just smear that around. That's a technical cooking term. So just spread that around. You can get it all the way to the edge closest to you and all the way to the edges on the sides. You do want to leave right there on the end away from you about a 1/2 inch or so, because that's where the bread is going to seal at the end when you're finished. All right, so I'm going to tell you how to do monkey bread really quick while we're chatting. That is in the recipe at the end. So you take the dough, it'll still be in your bowl. I use a scoop, about 2 tablespoons scoop, because it's just a little easier to scoop up that way. And then I scoop up a ball of dough with that scoop. And with your oiled hands, you can either just roll it with your oiled hands and then into the powdered sugar and cinnamon mixture in the recipe, or you can just plop that scoop right into the cinnamon sugar in the monkey bread recipe and roll that around. Then you just take those balls, you layer them up into your bundt pan and follow the recipe. So it's super simple to make. It's very fun. A lot of times I'll make that the night before and put it in the refrigerator, cover it with plastic wrap, and bake it off in the morning. All right, so I'm going to shape the dough now. So I'm going to take the plastic wrap and I'm just going to kind of push in the first little bit there. I want to make sure it starts to roll. If you go really, really fast right away, you'll get a really loose roll, and then you'll just have air pockets and it just won't cut as well. So I like to get the first little bit kind of really squished in there. And then you can just start to roll it once you kind of get yourself started. But that plastic wrap is just there. It just really helps support the dough. You'll be able to roll it. Oh, the cinnamon roll recipe packet will be on the same page that you're at. A little farther down on the page, there's a download. I believe it's below my name. Here we go. So it's stuck a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. You don't need to. It's not going to be as smooth because it is a sticky dough, but it'll be okay. You're not going to have pokey bits on your rolls after they raise and bake. They'll all smooth out and it'll be fabulous. And anything that looks weird, you just throw some frosting on, so it'll be fine. So I'm going to cut this. You can into different portions. If you do 8, you cut in the half, and then on the quarters, and then into each of those quarters another time. If you want to cut it in half, and then you've got bigger pieces. If you're just doing 8, if you're going to cut into 12, then you cut it in the middle, and then you'll do that. I'm going to do 9, and I use I use dental floss, unflavored, unwaxed dental floss. And the reason I do that, I learned how to do this when I was little from my mom. But the reason I do this, who learned it from her mom, I think they used thread when she was little. But the reason I do this is it gives you a really clean cut. If you use a knife, it'll smush the dough. So I'm intending to cut this into 9 pieces, but I got a little nervous and tired when I was making this. And so I'm going to be a little uneven because I started to cut like it was for 8. So some of them will be big and some of them will be little, but it's okay. If that happens, they'll all still bake up delicious. So you take it and you slide it under, and then you just cross and pull the string. And when you do that, it just gives you a super clean cut. So we're going to do it again. We're just going to cross the ends and pull. And look at that. It gives you such a clean cut. If you tried to cut this with a knife, it would smush the dough. It's very soft. There we go. So we're just going to keep cutting. So, and just, sometimes the plastic might slip around a little bit just when you're pulling the string under the dental floss under there. But just pull it back. This is also a good place that maybe if you have a friend that can help you or kids that can kind of anchor down the edges of the plastic wrap for you as well. So you can see I kind of got wild there. I'm making 9 of them because I'm putting them into a square pan. If an 8x8 square pan, if you were putting it into, or you can also put it into a 9x9 square pan. If you were going to put it into an 8x8 square, or an 8-inch round pan or a 9-inch round pan, you would want to cut it into 8 to get it to fit. So you don't have smushed buns. When I do a square, it just 9 fits really well. You can do 3x3. So I'm using an offset spatula, but you can use any kind of thin spatula to get under there. And I put a little bit of oil on the blade before I started, again, just so it doesn't stick. And I'm sliding it under there, kind of lifting them up and slipping them into my oiled pan. It's okay if a little bit sticks. You want to try to get all the dough in there, but you can see how wet and sticky the dough is. But it's still soft and or thick enough where you can shape it, which is great. I'm just going to oil it a little bit more there. Sometimes you'll need to do that part way through if it starts to stick a little too much. Yes, you can use a glass pan. Someone asked me if you could use a glass pan instead. You'll want to reduce the temperature by about 25 degrees, I believe. Oh, what's in the bottom of the pan? That pan, I don't have anything. It's just the way the pan is shaped. I don't have anything but oil in that pan. This particular pan happens to have kind of a ridged bottom, which makes it look like it's lined. It's just how it's made on that one. There we go. If you, someone is saying that they can't see, hear it right now because they're on a friend's computer, you can, this video will be recorded and you'll be able to play it back later here on the Online Nourished website. So I finished all that. I'm going to, now that the pan is set, all my rolls are in there. I even got my funny little tiny one on the end. It'll be okay. He'll raise up and fill up nicely. I'm just going to put plastic wrap over that, and I'm going to let that raise for a little bit in kind of just a room temperature, slightly warmer area. I'm just going to set that aside, and then we'll be good to go. So while that raises, I'm going to show you a few more ways how to shape your dough for some of the other flavors that we have in there. Okay, so I have my plastic wrap out again. I'm going to show you how puffy they got. I just want to show you that. So this is after they're raised, right before I put them into bake. Do you see how much they rose up? Even that little tiny guy really poofed out. So they're all set. They're nicely risen. They're not going to necessarily double in size like you would expect for a gluten-filled recipe, but that is enough of a raise right there for them to get ready to be baked. They had risen for about a half an hour in my house before I bake them. Someone was wondering, do I need to fill the pan or have them touching? You do not. It does kind of help to fill them a little bit if you have a pan. If they're touching, they do help each other. They kind of support each other and raise up a little bit better. I let them raise for about 30 minutes. Okay, I'm going to show you how, I'm going to get back to the video here. I'm going to show you how I make like a crescent roll shape. So I'm going to cut the dough. I put it more into a squarish shape. And then I'm using an oiled pizza cutter. We're just going to roll that down. You might see how the dough is starting to stick. I'm going to need to re-oil a little bit. Get a little more oil on there. Be careful. You don't want to hurt yourself on the blade. We're just gonna, and if it starts to, don't go super fast, because then if it starts to roll up a little bit, you can kind of push the dough back a little bit. I'm going to fill it with two different things with this particular recipe. I'm going to do chocolate chips on one side. They're gluten, dairy-free, soy-free chips I've got going on. And then on the other side, I'm going to fill with a savory filling, just for fun, because you can. So you can take the dough and fill it with a couple different things. If like we have 4 people in the house right now, so I can make 4 different things. It'll be kind of fun for everybody. You can make this recipe the night before. Take the rest. Someone is wondering if you can do that. You can. You shape your dough, put it in your oiled pan, and then cover it with plastic wrap. Let it raise overnight in the refrigerator. And then in the morning when you get up, take it out of the refrigerator and let it sit on the counter while you preheat your oven. and then you'll be able to bake that off. So I lifted the dough, if you see here, with the crescent rolls a little bit just to get it started for me so I could grab it. But you see, it is soft enough. I can pick it up and then roll that up. Now, because I haven't done a lot of video, I have it a little bit off of the screen here, but I will be putting it on a pan so you can see how I shaped it. So I rolled that off. Do you see how I've got it? Like a little crescent. It makes a little point there. And then I'm going to take the tips and I'm going to squeeze them together so that they seal. You might want to manipulate that a little bit. If anything's poking out, just kind of smooth it down with a little oil if you don't like how it's poking up. There you go. And then there's your nice little one. It's filled with chocolate. Afterwards, I'm going to put I'm going to just melt a little chocolate and drizzle it on top. That just gives it a different flavor. You can fill this with a lot of different things. Of course, you can also use the dough. It is a little bit sweetened, but it is not so sweet. You couldn't use it to make pigs in a blanket if you wanted to do that. With the second group, I'm going to be filling it with a little bit of ham. You can use smoked turkey and a little piece of Daya cheese, a dairy-free cheese replacement that you can get into a cube. And I really should have started this at the other end, but I got a little excited. So you just start rolling it on a wide end. And because of the Daya cheese is going to be a little bit stiff, you're not going to get a crescent, but you can have a nice little roll up. So this is kind of what you would do with a pigs in a blanket if you wanted to do that. So again, it's a little off. I'm going to show you it on a pan in just a moment. So I just kind of manipulate it with my oiled hands again, and I'll put that on the pan there. I'm going to finish those with, I'm going to sprinkle them with a bagel seasoning. So, one of those everything but the bagel type seasonings with cinnamon, or not with cinnamon, with garlic and onion and sesame seeds and poppy seeds to finish that side off. So those are the two that I'm making. I'm going to fill the rest of those and then get those ready to bake for you. So you can see that. I'm going to do one more shaping for you guys. So I'm just going to fill the rest of these up and get them set. And then we're going to do another shaping. I believe, let's see. Here we go. Here's my other shaping. I'm just going to scooch that ahead a little bit for you. So this is a shaping that I use for my cardamom buns. I've got cinnamon, I've got cardamom and white sugar in this particular one. My mom happens to be Swedish. My grandparents were Swedish, so we're big fans of cardamom in my house. And at Christmas time, I do like Santa Lucia buns and cardamom buns because, cardamon's delicious. So that's what these are going to be. These are going to be a Swedish cardamom bun. So I'm going to fill it all the way. I'm going to keep that end a little bit more open that I just showed you there on the right. That will be your sealed end, not the end farthest from you. So when you're facing the dough, if you're right-handed, you will want to keep the left edge with that open 1/2 inch of dough. If you're left-handed and want to fold this dough the other direction, you would have the right side open. All right, here we go. Now we're gonna, I want you to think about envelopes, how you fold a letter in to put into an envelope. And that's basically what I'm gonna do with this dough in order to get the layers of cardamom in between the dough for how I'm gonna shape it. So I've got that all smoothed out on there. I do like cardamom. I don't know how you guys are, but it's one of my favorites. And I'm going to use that plastic wrap again to help me lift and manipulate the dough. But instead of rolling it, I'm going to fold it by 1/3 and then I'll fold the other 1/3 in. So I'm going to lift that dough and not just flip it. I'm going to get my hand under there so that I can kind of feel along where that edge is. And then I'm going to just do the best I can. Just fold it by about 1/3. It'll be a little off, but it's okay. You want to just kind of pat that out and get it on there. Sometimes there's a little air bubble that pops up. And then you want to do the same thing on the other side. Get your hand under there and flip. See, because I didn't get my hand under there because I was all excited, it kind of wrinkled, but it's all right. You can get your spatula under there, manipulate it around a little bit. It will be fine. Once it bakes up, now you're going to use the plastic wrap to turn your dough. There you go. So now it's been folded into thirds. You've got that filling. You've got 2 layers of filling, 3 layers of dough. Now that you've done that, and now we're going to pat that out again to get the layers thin and to spread the dough out. Now, when you do this, you want to be gentle with your dough. You don't want to just start smashing on it. All your filling's going to spread everywhere, and you're going to tear the dough. So just gently pat it. You're going to see some tearing. Some of the filling will kind of come out a little bit. You'll actually see that in this video as we go along. I will have a little tear there, kind of right where my thumb is. There it is. It's okay. You just kind of smush it together a little bit. It's not a big deal. You're going to be cutting this dough. That filling will be all right. You just kind of pat it out. Just want to get it sealed together really well without really taking the dough out. And then you're kind of elongating the dough and getting kind of a nice rectangular shape again. And see how that sealed the top edge there? That dough is starting to kind of come together as you pat it. So that's pretty good. I'm good enough there. I'm going to use that pizza cutter again to cut the dough. I'm going to oil it and then we'll slice it. And again, remember, be careful when you get your blade oiled. You could use a spray on that and just spritz it. So I'm just going to eyeball it. You could use a measuring tool. I have my kitchen ruler there. But if you wanted to just eyeball it, you could. I'm going to be cutting it into 8 pieces. This is the same dough. Someone is wondering if this is the same dough or is it a savory dough. This is an enriched, slightly sweetened dough, but I don't put a lot of sugar into my doughs or cookies that I'm going to decorate with other flavors because you're already going to have so much sweetness in the filling and in the toppings. So you've got 8 pieces here. And now you're going to want to cut something with a little end still. So you're cutting like a little pair of pants. The top part is going to stay attached. So if you go from the bottom to the top, you might cut all the way through. So I start right a little bit farther down so that I don't cut it all the way in half. It's okay if that tears a little bit. You need a little bit more oil. So again, start up at the top and then roll backwards. It also helps elongate the dough a little. So you've got an attached edge on the end of each of the 8 dough pieces that will turn into your cardamom buns, the Swedish cardamom buns. I've got them all there. I'm going to show you how I shape it into 2 different ways. Get my pan here for you. So I've lined the bottom of this with parchment, mostly because the sugar is going to kind of bake out a little bit and caramelize, and it'll be a lot easier to clean up if you have, instead of just oil, if you use a Silpat or a parchment. So I'm going to loosen that guy up. I'm going to move him very gently over to my pan. Just kind of put him where you think you're going to want him to live. You can move him after he's shaped, but it'll be a little bit easier if you've got it close by. Get that other dough out of the way so you can see it. Okay, so here we go. We've got my dough. I'm going to lift one side, and I'm going to want to very gently lift and turn. So we're going to lift and kind of turn the dough with the filling, and it's going to get messy. You're going to get sugar on your hands. It's okay. It's kind of fun. And you're going to turn the other side as well. It's actually a little bit easier if you turn one side at a time. And there we go. You've got them turned, and then we're going to twist them on each other. And this is the stick. I'm going to cover it with an almond powdered sugar with just a little bit of almond extract, and toasted almonds afterwards. So these are our twist, and I didn't put them in the recipe book. It's just a way of shaping. So again, you're just going to twist the end of the dough here. And then you'll get all those really beautiful layers of the cinnamon and cardamom. They'll be all twisted up when they bake. It'll be, oh, it's just really fabulous. And then you've got your little twist. Now they're going to kind of bake, like get their little ends all over the place. It'll be really fun. And here's another one. I'm gonna jump forward a little bit because I don't want you guys to run out of time. And I'm going to show you how I make the round ones. Oops, here we go. We're done to the end of that. Now I'm going to make a round one. So I'm going to take the dough and I'm going to separate it. And that one end, I'm just going to work with one end at a time. I'm going to take that one end and twist it. And I'm going to take that end and just pile it on top of that sealed end, just kind of on top like a little hat or a little messy bun, you know, up on top. And then you twist the other leg and you put it around. Now you've got this nice little, it looks like a braided knot afterwards. And then I take a ring. You can use a piece of foil if you wanted to shape that into a ring, but this is just one that's used for English muffins or hamburger buns. And that is going to hold the dough really nicely in a round. You don't have to, it'll just kind of start to bake a little flatter. If you do use the ring, your bun will stay nice and round and kind of have a lot more loft, which is what I like. So I'm going to show you how to make one more here. Actually, I'm going to get a little more ahead so you can see it a little better. This one's a better one. Here we go. We're going to roll it, twist it, put that twist up on the top. And then I'm going to twist the sec on top of the end, the sealed end. Then I'm going to twist again that other end of dough and tuck that under. And this is if you didn't put it on the pan. You can see, I want to show you that you can lift it and move it with a thin spatula. And there you go. So that's the cardamom bun and how to raise that. You can spray the ring so that it is oiled. But I find that because there's so much of the fat already in the filling, you don't necessarily need to spray the ring. So you can do either one if you wanted to do that. I'm going to just kind of go ahead now and show you the finished buns here. That's what they all look like. Okay, here we go. I'm going to show you my buns. Got my cinnamon rolls. I've got the chocolate-filled ones. These are the ones that are savory with the ham and the seasoning on top. And these are, in the back, are the Swedish cardamom buns, how they baked up. I'm going to put all of them up a little closer so that you can see them. So here's the cinnamon rolls. This is what they bake up to look like. I'm going to tear one of those open so you can see that really the texture of the dough. So you see how it's soft. It bakes up like a bun. You can tear it and get a nice, it's really soft. It's got really great structure. Doing the sponge method really makes a difference with bread doughs. You're going to get so much of a better texture, very much more like what you've been missing. These are the cinnamon bun or the cardamom buns. I finished them off with pearl sugar because that's a traditional Swedish thing. You can get that on Amazon or at specialty markets. I've got toasted almonds and powdered sugar glaze with a little bit of almond extract in it on those. These are the chocolate-filled ones. I took chocolate and drizzled on top afterwards because yum. and I like that. My family are chocolate hounds. It's kind of terrible, actually, how much they love it. And then the savory ones, of course, are there again with the everything but the bagel type of seasoning on top. So it's not too sweet, so you can use that in a savory recipe as well and fill it with whatever. Someone is asking if the sponge method is on my recipe site, and it is in the recipe itself on the packet that you'll find here on the site. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so you can see me again. Can you see me again? Hi. So the recipe packet will be on just below this recipe or just below this presentation. You go farther down, it'll be right under my name. There's a PDF. The recipe will be there with some different fillings. Um, and I'm going to answer some questions now if you guys have any. Let me scroll back a little bit. I want to make sure we have time for some of these. See where we're at. I'm trying to find stuff I haven't answered. Oh, someone is wondering if they've had nothing but bad luck with yeast in the past. Do I have any advice? Baking with yeast, I do have some advice. So using the sponge method will really help because you'll know that that yeast is all activated. You'll be able to see because it'll be bubbled up. If this is the way your sponges, you know that that yeast is going. It's got all those active bubbles in it. It's lifted. I always like to start a recipe with yeast with a little bit of the milk replacement to the side in a tiny little bowl with the yeast in it, and just kind of leave it for about 5 minutes, not cold. I usually have the dairy replacement or the water at room temperature. And I just kind of wait to see if the bubbles activate. A lot of trouble with yeast is when you use something too hot and you kill it. You don't want to cook your yeast before it has a chance to really get going. So do your ingredients at room temperature, and that will help it get its bubbles moving. Someone says they're not a fan of cardamom, can use an almond filling. Yes, it's so good. I use an almond filling as well. I just use a lot of cardamom for my Swedish mom and family during the holidays. You can use almond. Let's see. Someone again is wondering about flour blends. I do make a lot of my own flour blends, but I know a lot of people use other ones. I've used the Bob's Red Mill. I talked about that if you want to go back farther in the presentation near the beginning. And then I did make this particular recipe today with the the Namaste brand. And I found this giant bag at Costco, so that was pretty exciting. So I've done that. If you do use flour blend, though, do not add the xanthan gum or the guar gum that's in the recipe if your flour blend already contains it. Otherwise, it'll be just super bouncy. Someone is asking, do I grind the cardamom or use whole? I use ground cardamom in the recipe. Someone is asking, would this make a good pizza crust? I have not made this as a pizza crust. I think you could use it as a pizza crust. I have a pizza crust that I make that my family really likes. It's on my blog, angelaskitchen.com. But I believe you could use this as a recipe, or as a pizza recipe as well. It says, what high protein flours can you use in place of, I'm assuming, the flour blends? So if you would like to ask me about the high protein flours, do email me. I've got a large list, and I don't think we have enough time on this one, but email me at angela@angelaskitchen.com, and I will make sure you get my high protein replacements. I do a lot of other baking with less carbs and more, high protein stuff. But I think with cinnamon rolls and that kind of thing, sometimes I don't make them so often that I feel bad about using one that's kind of a little bit sugary and a little bit soft. If I'm craving a cinnamon roll, I like to make sure I've satisfied that craving by having the one of the really good kind that I want, so that I do that. Someone is asking, will almond flour work? I have not done this recipe with almond flour, and I would have a different recipe to use with almond flour with this recipe. Because it would be not soft enough. With almond flour with this recipe, you would want to add some starches. There's not really a cup for cup replacement for a lot of gluten-free flours to flour. Usually you won't want to use a blend, but with almond flour that can be done. Again, email me at Angela's Kitchen at angela@angelaskitchen.com, and I will work on that with you about how to replace that if you'd like to use more almond flour. So, but again, these are ones I make for during the holidays. To freeze these, I do want to tell you about that. I take the dough. So when I've shaped the dough before it's risen, so when I've cut it, I'll take those pieces of dough, I'll put it on a pan lined with plastic wrap or a Silpat. And then I'll put that into the coldest part of my freezer and just get it cold really quick so it doesn't have a chance to raise. Once those rolls are frozen, however I've shaped them, I'll put them into a freezer safe container, layer wax paper in between all the layers, and then add it, so that they don't stick. And then I'll seal them. Make sure to label your stuff because it all looks the same in the freezer once it's frozen. And then I'll tuck that into the freezer. When I'm ready to bake, sometimes, when my kids came home from college or it's the holidays and I made these ahead, it's really great because the night before I want to have rolls. Say like the day before Thanksgiving, you wanted to have cinnamon rolls in the morning on Thanksgiving. The night before, you take those rolls out, the frozen rolls, put them in an oiled pan, cover that pan with plastic wrap, and put it in the refrigerator. Those rolls are going to thaw and raise, and they're going to actually be really good because they're going to have a nice slow raise, which is really going to develop the flavor of the rolls. In the morning, you get up, get your tea or coffee, get those rolls out, set them on the counter while you're preheating the oven. And then once that oven's preheated, take the plastic wrap off and pop them in and bake them off. It's really nice to have them already frozen in the freezer ahead of time, especially during the holidays. You can make these up to 2 months ahead in the freezer. I have done that. With some of the fillings, if you're going to do an orange filling or any kind of jam filling or the cranberry filling, I wouldn't do them more than probably 3 weeks to a month ahead, just because that filling kind of falls out because it's so soft in the freezer. Even though it's frozen, it just kind of gets a little softer. It's still okay. You're just going to have to kind of get the filling or scrape the filling up and put it in your pan, but maybe not more than 3 weeks to a month ahead of when you are going to want them if they have a jam filling. The other ones will be okay up to 2 months ahead in the freezer. So I'm going to see if there's any other questions. Someone is wondering, can you use butter instead of margarine? Yes, you could use butter. We don't do butter in our house because I have an EpiPen for that. And I have $2 with an allergy too. So yeah, go ahead and use butter if you can use butter. It'll be super delicious. Seeing if there's any other questions. Oh, somebody is asking me about garfava flour. So that is a flour I do use. It's a combination of garbanzo beans and fava beans. Now, when I started baking 20 some years ago, gluten-free, there wasn't any flour blends out. I needed to, the only resources out there there just really wasn't any resources. However, at my library, I found books from Carol Fenster and Beth, what's her name now? She's the gluten-free gourmet. She's passed away now. And Beth Hilson. So those three ladies just were awesome. They were the only resources out there, and had such great resources on how to bake properly gluten-free, and they were experimenting, and they really helped show me how to use some of these different kinds of flours. And so I did start using garfava. You can get that from Bob's Red Mill, and you can get it from Authentic Foods. So it's not always as readily available, but it's got a really high protein content, which is great for structure in gluten-free baking, especially for breads. And Betty Hagen, yes, thank you. Betty Hagen was the person, gluten-free gourmet. She's so great. So those were the ones that gave me the resources to help me break down the different flour and starch components. And then I started experimenting with those myself. They're great resources. If you can find their books in the library or on Amazon. Carol puts up a lot of stuff. So does Beth Hilson, and on their blogs and their sites. And but they're just amazing. They've just got so much wisdom. I definitely check their sites out and their recipes out because they've got a lot of wisdom and a lot of just a breakdown of the chemistry of how some of those starches work with the different flours. So definitely, definitely want to look them up. So I'm trying to see if there's anything else. I'm gonna keep looking. Oh, somebody's wondering what I covered my jar with. This is a coffee filter. And I was the other day it filled up so much that I didn't want it to explode out the top if it kept growing. So I think that's all the questions. If I miss anything, let me know. You can use any kind of dairy replacement with this recipe depending on whether you use nut or hemp or, a different coconut milk. I've used them all in this recipe. So you can try that. Trying to see what else. It's hard because it keeps scrolling back. I'm sorry if I'm missing anything. If I've missed any of your questions, I'm going to need to wrap this up. But if I've missed any of your questions at all, please email me at Angela's Kitchen. I can pull all of those questions together into a PDF with the answers because some of you have similar questions, and I will upload it. I will be getting the chat and also any questions you email me. And I'll put them all into a PDF that I'll upload probably in 2 weeks. Start looking for that here on the same site. I just need to get that check questions from the Nourish Festival and any of the questions that you guys send in. I'll make sure you guys get those answers and I can put them all together. So thank you so much. Oh, somebody was wondering, Carol Fenster. All right. So let me you have a great day. I'll talk to you later. Bye.